This is the high I'm still chasing. What's up, guys? So Halo Combat Evolved and I go way back. I remember I was just a wee lad when it was coming out. Now, I was too young to really understand what all the hype was and, why it was such a big deal. But I remember seeing the posters and the cardboard cutouts of Master Chief everywhere. My first experience with Halo was actually going to a GameStop with my older brother. Remember when GameStop was actually a big deal? Anyway, I was a big fan of sci-fi and military movies and stuff like that, so when I saw Master Chief in all the ad materials, I didn't know anything about it, but I just knew it looked cool, and I was excited to play it. So the GameStop had the Xbox, the OG Xbox, in this case, in the glass case with the TV and the controller sticking out, as they used to do. And the whole station was like adorned in Halo marketing material. It had the Combat Evolved cover, basically, where it had Master Chief in the front, and a Banshee flying in the background, and a Marine firing his assault rifle. It just looks so cool, and I was like, man, I'm about to play a little bit of Halo. Like, this just looks so cool. Little kid me was extremely excited. Anyway, I step up to the controller, and I'm ready to play, and find out Halo's not even on it. It was Oddworld, Munch's Odyssey. And I was kind of mad. I wanted to play as the green guy. So anyway, that was actually my first experience with Halo. It wasn't until a year or two later when I actually played it at my brother-in-law's house on his Xbox, and I was like, yeah, this is gonna make me an Xbox guy. And I've been a Halo fan ever since. So anyway, getting catfished by a GameStop demo aside, Halo Combat Evolved is still one of the greatest games ever made. And as I've said in other videos, I'm a giant Halo fan. I play through the entire series at least a couple of times a year, and Halo CE is what started it all. And it is still worth playing in this year of 2024. Even if you have no experience with Halo, you've never played it, never been a fan, don't know anything about it, it is still definitely worth your time. Now, obviously, this video is going to have some spoilers for the plot because this game is old enough to have a mortgage and a family, or, well, for these days, I guess it's old enough to pay really high rent and have a dog, I guess. But even with these spoilers, it's still worth playing. So starting off, Halo drops you right into the action. Right away, you see the main ship, Pillar of Autumn, which is just a cool name. Halo always has cool names for their ships. Anyway, the Pillar of Autumn comes into view with Halo in the background, and right away you get the sense that the humans are on the back foot as Captain Keyes and Cortana are explaining that they're on the run and the Covenant are still in pursuit. And as they wonder about the colossal ring world in front of them, they start getting attacked by the Covenant fleet. So right away, the game's 30 seconds into the plot, and they're already getting attacked. It's already chaos. You're seeing the Marines get ready. They're mobilizing. The Pelicans are flying throughout the ship. They're getting the Warthogs ready to go. Anybody who grew up during like post 9/11 military propaganda, like this shit just got you going.
People going.
Then we are finally introduced to our main man, John Halo. Just kidding. John 117, the Master Chief. Now, you're never actually told a whole lot about Master Chief in the game. Back in the day, games used to come with a booklet or a manual, and a lot of times they would have like little snippets of lore. And in that manual, it kind of explained a little bit of where humanity's at in this war, where Reach just fell, and they're on the run, all this stuff. They're losing the war, and Master Chief is the last of the Spartans, which isn't entirely true, but for the main Bungie games, it's essentially true. Anyway, you come out of that cryo tube and you start going through a short tutorial. There was a time games actually used to do this. Like you'd have to go through like an obstacle course or, go to like the firing range and kind of learn the basics of the game. Because this is back when, every game kind of had like their own control scheme. Now it's kind of standardized after Call of Duty kind of changed everything. But back then you'd have to go through this little training section. And what set this one apart from other training sections in other games was that you still felt this sense of urgency because you can actually hear the Pillar of Autumn getting boarded in the background through announcements from Cortana, through announcements from other Marines.
Captain, we'll have to skip the weapons diagnostics and
On the double, crewman.
Aye, aye, sir. The skipper seems jumpy. We'd better get moving. We'll find you weapons later.
So there's a sense of urgency that you need to hurry up, get this done, and immediately get into the fight. And once you're finished with that tutorial, you're thrown right into the fight. The guys who woke you up from cryo sleep get attacked, and you have to get going. And as you're led weaponless throughout the Pillar of Autumn until you can get to the bridge, you just see the Marines getting their shit rocked. And you get this sense of urgency and the sense that humanity's losing this war already. We're only a few minutes in, and we kind of already got that feeling. Then once we meet Captain Keyes and Mommy Cortana, we're finally given a weapon, and we fight our way to an escape pod and make our way off the Pillar of Autumn. Of course, with the Pillar of Autumn going down as well, crash landing on the ring. And right there is your very first level. And, when I had first played this finally, Like, this is the only level I had played, and I was immediately hooked. I was like, dude, I have to finish this game. And not a lot of games at the time did that. You know, there weren't a lot of games that just dropped you right into the middle of that. And hell, a lot of games still don't do that. The whole level feels like it came right out of an action sci-fi movie from the 80s or 90s. And that's just something this game does very well. It just gets tone right. It understands tone. It understands how to show you its personality right away. And that's further demonstrated when we actually land on Halo and you see the ring for the first time. You know, all the Marines are dead in the drop pod, and you step out and you look and you're like, wow, I'm actually on the ring. Now, it may not be so impressive these days, but at the time, like, I don't know, that was just cool, man. And I don't know, even today, I feel like it's still kind of a big deal. It still just looks cool. You know, stepping out into that kind of forested area and looking up and seeing the ring around you. And there's this sense of wonder and mystery that a lot of games just don't do these days. I feel like that is, you know, an issue with a lot of games, is that there's such a focus on realism and almost being able to like live in the game that they kind of forget that games are, you know, are an art form. And Halo kind of showed that there's an art to this, that there's a little bit of nuance, where even though this game has one foot in reality, where, you know, this feels like a real place, like this could be like a realistic point in humanity's future with, you know, the grounded military, but then you also have the Covenant on the other side who look very alien, like not even just the models, but also like their ships and everything just look very alien. And then you're on Halo, which, you know, almost feels like a fantasy world, and all of these things come together to create kind of a unique experience and a unique feeling. And I think it's something that still hasn't been replicated to this day. I don't even think Halo itself has been able to replicate it. And as you move through this area and fight through some enemies, you come up across your first group of Marine survivors. And it's another thing that I think this game just does very well and adds to the overall tone, where these Marines are now kind of dressed much lighter. They interact with you. There's even some engineers. They're not even Marines. They're just engineers from the ship who are just stranded now. And again, it just adds to this overall sense of desperation, where these guys are just trying to survive against the alien onslaught. These guys will interact with you too. Like, for instance, if you accidentally shoot them, well, accidentally, they'll say something to you along the lines of, hey, can you stop shooting me? If they accidentally shoot you, they'll interact with you on that too. For instance, saying, oh, sorry, I shot you, kind of thing. And I understand that that's kind of just a basic thing, but it's something that AI doesn't even do today, over 20 years later. So even when you're interacting with some no-name Marine NPC, it feels like you're interacting with something a little bit more real. And as you're searching for all these human survivors, you get to explore a little bit more of the ring. And going back to the tone of the game, this is where they add a little bit more to the mystery, where a lot of the mystery and frankly kind of spookiness of the ring is sprinkled into the action, where there's short moments of quiet and solitude for you to really kind of appreciate the details of the ring and wonder, you know, who the hell built this? Because obviously it's not Covenant, right? It's not human. And so, again, it adds to that sense of mystery. Even though the story, like the plot hasn't gotten too deep yet, you as the player, you know, being the Master Chief, it makes you want to find out more. And that just speaks in a broader sense to how this game plays overall. First of all, while it's not an open world game, it gives you a lot of freedom. For instance, finding all the Marine survivors on Halo gives you the freedom to choose what order to find them in and what routes to take to get there. Or in later levels, you have the options to go stealthy or guns blazing, or choose a different route to go into a room, or maybe even just run right by the enemies altogether. You even have the freedom to just drive your Warthog right off the edge of a cliff. And honestly, the freedom to do something stupid like that is unparalleled and super underrated. And I understand that that's just a little thing, but that really adds to the overall sense of freedom in the way this game plays that a lot of games just don't have anymore. Like, come on, games, just let me jump into the abyss. Now, where the tone, the sense of freedom, and the overall gameplay all come together is in the combat. First of all, I think Halo Combat Evolved is probably the best balanced of all the Halos. While it's not my favorite Halo, that honor belongs to Halo 2, this game just feels good to play. Each enemy type has a very specific way of beating it. They all have their own animations and ways of moving or attacking you. So the way you might fight an elite is going to be different than the way you fight a jackal. And then, of course, the grunts you can just smack around. That's what they're there for. Poor grunts. Then you have your well-known Halo weapons, which offer another level of freedom. Which, you know, if you've just played something like Call of Duty your whole life, I don't think you really appreciate what it feels like to actually have weapons that do different things. Of course, the Covenant plasma weapons do the best against energy shields, such as the Jackal shields or the Elite's overshields. And they don't use actual ammo, they use a battery, so when you run out, you just have to pick up another one and keep going, providing a different sense of gameplay there. Then the human weapons is really where it's at. While back in the day, the assault rifle was kind of complained about because it's very short range and inaccurate, for me personally, I'm an original assault rifle enjoyer. Because while no, it's not the most effective weapon, it just feels nice to use because it feels heavy, it feels real. I feel like a colonial marine straight out of Aliens. So for me, it's just something that adds to that overall tone again. So I'm actually kind of less of a fan of the later assault rifles that are more accurate and are a little easier to use just because they don't have that same feel to it. Now, there's one weapon though, and I think any Halo fan knows what I'm talking about. It's the creme de la creme, baby. The Magnum just goes hard. And it's really a shame that this is the only Halo that it actually appears in. I mean, yeah, technically it is in Halo Reach, but it just doesn't hit the same. I mean, this thing is quite literally the definition of a hand cannon. I mean, it can one-shot a hunter, something that not even the shotgun can do consistently. And yeah, I get it's a little OP, but it's fun to use. Halo Studios, just bring it back, man. Now, moving on to some grander things. The overall story of Halo. While I wouldn't describe Halo Combat Evolved as a very deep plot, it really is a perfect entry point into a much larger universe. Like I said, they do just kind of drop you right into the middle of the action, and I think that's something that was needed for a game like this. I mean, in the lore, the Human Covenant War has been going on for 30 years, and the first 3 Halo games all take place within like the last few months of the war. So I would compare it more to something like Star Wars A New Hope, where it is essentially just an introduction to a much larger universe with a fairly simple and easy to understand story. You know, you have your humans who are clearly on the back foot. They land on this mysterious world, and you play throughout the game and learn the secrets behind it. Pretty simple, easy to understand. But where I would say this game kind of sets itself apart is in how you actually progress through this story and what details it decides to show you and when it decides to show you those details. For instance, you don't learn a whole lot about the Covenant in this game, but you do learn a little bit through environmental storytelling, and such as boarding the Truth and Reconciliation to save Captain Keyes, and you get to see firsthand what the Covenant ships look like. Still not learning a whole lot about them because they usually speak to you in, their mother tongue. So a lot of that story is told through the actual gameplay. But when you do get a cutscene, the cutscenes do a great job of actually pushing the plot forward without taking away from the gameplay, where they strike a really good balance between, being a movie game like what we get a lot today versus just a cutscene that sets up the next level like a lot of the games of the time did. So while these cutscenes may be starting to show their age, I do just honestly think that they're much better constructed and more conducive to an overall gaming experience than a lot of what we get today. And that brings us to our characters. While I wouldn't say there's any performances in here that are going to be Oscar-worthy, every character in this game plays a very specific role and they play it well. Obviously you have somebody like Captain Keyes who just kind of plays your stereotypical military leader, or Sergeant Johnson, who's also a stereotypical military leader, but more of that drill sergeant type. But then there's your 3 main characters. Obviously there's Master Chief, which honestly, as far as like dialogue or character development go, in this game, in this particular Halo, he's not really given much. But the performance of Steve Downes and his just iconic voice makes Master Chief just really cool to listen to. So even though Master Chief himself is not really given a whole lot to work with within the dialogue of the story, because the developer's goal was to make you, the player, feel like Master Chief, Steve Downes is just so damn good at playing this character that he really just elevates it to an iconic level. While I think his later performances in the Halo games are much better, this is still a solid performance by Steve Downes and a great entry point into the character. Then of course there is Mami Cortana. While she's a little bit more early 2000s vibe and isn't the Cortana we later get in Halo 4, she's probably really the most interesting character throughout the whole game. And much like Steve Downes, Jen Taylor elevates this character to such an iconic level that her voice is almost irreplaceable as Cortana. And she's probably the voice you hear the most because you don't only see her in the cutscenes, but you also hear her during the gameplay. And frankly, as far as all the dialogue goes, she kind of carries it. Anyway, as the plot moves along, it does kind of follow just your average military storyline. You're saving Marines left and right, you're killing the aliens, and you're just moving along through the Halo. But what this game does differently, and it's another reason why this game is so well remembered, it's really for the curveball that it throws at you about halfway through the game. Obviously, the Halo itself provides a certain sense of mystery, but when you actually begin to uncover what the Halos were built for, Halo turns into a straight-up horror game. You're not told what it is right away, but you're given a very stern warning by Cortana to go stop Captain Keyes before he finds too much within the Halo. Because throughout this game, you're kind of led to believe that Halo is a weapon, which it is, but you're also led to believe that Halo can be a weapon that can be used against the Covenant, or the Covenant might use it against humanity. But then there's that twist in the story. When you go to find Captain Keyes, and you're going through these corridors deep within the Halo, you pass bloodied and gored Covenant, dripping slime, and Marines who are beginning to lose their minds, to eventually discover the only enemy the Covenant truly fear, the Flood. Now again, it's one of those things where you're not told a whole lot about the Flood, just that they are a galaxy-destroying parasite that are essentially space zombies. But the first Halo, in my opinion, is when they are at their scariest. And I'm gonna be honest, back when I was a kid, because when I was first surprised by the Flood, I would play this game about halfway through. I would get to the level of 343 Guilty Spark, and then I would stop playing and I would restart the game because the Flood scared me that bad. Of course, I quit being a wuss eventually and played it, but that's how I was a kid. All right, give me a break. But the Flood in this one are the most numerous. The spores themselves will start to, flood you. And the actual combat forms are somewhat difficult to kill, particularly if you don't have a shotgun. And if you don't follow the second rule of Zombieland, double tap, the combat forms will get back up sometimes and smack you right in the back of the head, further demonstrating that this is something that just wasn't done yet at the time. And these are the kinds of gameplay elements that really made this game iconic and why it was such a big deal of the time. And it's just another reason why this game still holds up so well today, because even now you still don't see a lot of games do things like this. Because what made the Flood scary wasn't just because they look scary or have a scary backstory or anything like that. It was that they offered a clear step up in the difficulty of gameplay, and you had to approach it differently. So the horror didn't just come from the aesthetics, it came from the way you had to interact with this particular enemy. And that finally brings us to our final character, 343 Guilty Spark. Man, fuck this dude. If you must know anything about this guy, he is basically a galactic Karen. Because if all the rules and standards of the HOA aren't followed, he will literally freak. No, but really, he has to follow every single protocol of the Halo at the detriment of all life in the galaxy. When you find out that that's what Halo is for, is to kill everything in the galaxy so the Flood can't spread anymore. So he essentially manipulates the Master Chief into trying to activate the ring to stop the Flood, eventually really turning into your true main antagonist. Once you decide that that's, not what you're going to do, and he doesn't like that, and he still wants to activate the ring, because, protocol must be followed. Now that is essentially the plot and the main characters of Halo. So moving away from that for a moment, and before I get to the end, I just want to talk about a few miscellaneous details from this game that I think further add to the overall value of the game, and maybe even a few complaints that you may have if playing this over 20 years later. Number one, this is something that you are going to enjoy no matter what era you play this in, and I don't give a damn about your tastes. The music in Halo is iconic, and it's perfect. Marty O'Donnell seems to have just the perfect score for this game, and really came up with something unique and special for every single level, and not even just the level, but there's different sections within a level that will have different music, and it all just comes together to create, again, this overall sense of atmosphere, but even the atmosphere within those smaller sections. And for me, a lot of times when I play a game, I don't really notice the score, but this game, like, right when it starts playing, right when that music starts playing, you feel it. Like, I mean, I hate to use this so often, but it just gets you going.
Gets the people going.
Whether it's the main Halo theme for when you're on your Warthog run, or it's something a little bit more chill, like when you're trying to board the Truth and Reconciliation. The music in this game is just iconic and always will be. Next thing is the co-op, and if you ever have an opportunity to play this with a friend, highly recommend it. Co-op is just such a staple of Halo, and it's really a shame that Halo Infinite didn't have split-screen co-op. As I've said in other videos, my wife will actually play Halo with me. She's played through the whole series with me, aside from 5 and Infinite, because they didn't have split screen. But, some of my earliest memories were playing through Halo with my brother, or with some friends after school. Unlike a lot of games today, Halo is first and foremost a social game. Not only was it something that everybody talked about, but it was something that you experienced with someone else. Even while making this video, because I made a Halo Combat Evolved remake video not too long ago. So, I did a single player playthrough to get footage for that. And then, of course, I had to do a single player playthrough to get footage for this video. But in between all that, I actually got to play this game with a friend who has never played Halo before. Well, I think he played ODST, but come on, that barely counts. And obviously I don't have any co-op footage in this video, and I even thought, wow, it would have saved me a lot of work if I would have just recorded while playing with my friend. But I thought, you know what, this is his first time playing this game. I actually want to just focus on enjoying this game with my friend, and I'll go do my other playthrough later. I wanted to enjoy it with him instead of focusing on getting good footage. And I'm glad I did, because not only did he enjoy the game, but I enjoyed playing it with him, and it was, again, something that I think is lost in a lot of games these days, where not only is there just not a whole lot of couch co-op, but there's not a whole lot of co-op in general. And sometimes it's nice to just sit back and play through a story that you'll both love, and you guys can experience some of those things like a Warthog run or some Marty O'Donnell music, and just experience all that together. So anyway, the last thing I want to talk about before I get to the end of the game is just the overall design of these levels. Like I said earlier in the video, these levels do a good job of sprinkling in the mystery or the horror elements, or the overall spookiness of some of the ruins of this ancient Forerunner civilization. Now, I will say, I think this is something that they both do very well and not so well. It's one of those things I think hasn't actually aged too great. Because while levels like the Pillar of Autumn, Halo, Silent Cartographer, 343 Guilty Spark, those are designed very well and are iconic in their own right, there are also other levels that haven't aged so well because they get a little repetitive, they're too long, and while they're still very fun to play, at least for me, playing it, for the 1000th time, sometimes it's just like, okay, this level's just getting a little too long. For instance, and I don't know, maybe I'll be crucified for this one, but the library, an iconic level. It is a great level, don't get me wrong. I love it, I love playing through it. Rocket Flug be going brazy, but that should be going on way too long. Because the library doesn't really add a whole lot to the story, but it goes on forever. And it wouldn't be so bad if there was at least a little bit of variety, but you essentially go through the same kind of hallways over and over and over, and you got to go through 10 different big doors, hold the position, move on. Like I said, the gameplay of Halo itself is just so fun from a basic standpoint that you don't notice it too much on, your first few playthroughs. But after this many years of me playing it, I do just start to notice those flaws and where it does need a little bit more variety. Same thing with a level like 2 Betrayals, where even though it's done very well, where they do add a little bit of variety, for instance, because now the Flood's introduced, and you even have a Banshee section where you got to fly around and get to these different power generators. You're essentially just backtracking the longest level Assault on the Control Room. So yeah, they change it up a little bit, but it kind of still eventually, at its core, feels like you're playing the same thing. And then you also do that again on the level Keys, where yeah, sure, you play a little bit on the ground, and that's a little bit different. You're fighting the Flood once again, but you go back onto Truth and Reconciliation, and you're going through a lot of these same corridors that you've already explored earlier in the game. But that being said, they are all still very fun to play, and that is still my biggest complaint through, over 20 years, so it's still doing pretty well. And even then, I still think that they changed up the levels enough to make it still feel like a slightly new thing. I think it's more so that since I've been playing it for so long, I do just kind of notice that repetition. So, if this is only your first playthrough, or I would say even your 9th or 10th playthrough, it still will probably feel fresh to you. Now, the level design helps me segue right into talking about the end of the game. And even though the final level kind of actually has some of those complaints I just mentioned, where you're re-exploring something you've already gone through earlier in the game, the level The Maw is actually probably my favorite level in all of Halo. Sure, you're going through the Pillar of Autumn, and you've already done that, and I'm probably sounding like a bit of a hypocrite after just complaining about this, but you get to see the Pillar of Autumn, first of all, destroyed, and you get to see the aftermath of what the Covenant attack did to it, on top of it now being overrun with the Flood. But what's cool about this level, and where they kind of change this one up compared to some of the other ones that are retreads, you actually go to some of these different locations that you've already gone through, and you see them from a different angle or completely new route, so it feels a little bit more fresh. Not to mention, with the Flood and the Covenant both here, it can be difficult as hell to play through. But eventually, we're ready to finish this story, and you and Cortana come up with a plan to destroy the Pillar of Autumn, and in turn destroy the Halo. And let me tell you, it is time to light this candle. So you move through the Pillar of Autumn, again exploring some areas you actually haven't seen before. You eventually go to the engine room, and you are tasked with destroying certain vents to cause a chain reaction within the Pillar of Autumn and cause a meltdown that will destroy the ship and Halo. Once you destroy these vents, the countdown has begun, and the reactor is about to melt down, and it is now time to get off this damn ring. And thus begins one of the most iconic pieces of gameplay in all of gaming history, the Warthog Run. Of course, there's the Warthog Run in Halo 3, which you could argue may be more iconic, but this is the one that started it all. You know, I understand that this is somewhat of a retrospective type video, but you still have to put yourself in the shoes of people back then. There was simply nothing else like this at the time. There was nothing quite so cinematic, and, to compare it to things today, if it were in a modern game, this would all be reserved for a cutscene. They wouldn't let you play through it. But anyway, you jump in that Warthog, and you're driving your way out of there, running into Flood, getting chased by Sentinels all the way through while that clock counts down. And of course, it throws you another curveball about halfway through when a character I actually haven't mentioned in this video yet because you never actually see her, but she's a very familiar voice throughout the game. Foehammer's coming to pick you up, and she unfortunately gets shot down by Banshees. And so now you are officially the only one left on the ring. But now we have to find another way out. Cortana tells you about a longsword that's still in the hangar, and we make our way through, continuing the Warthog Run, racing against time. When you finally get to the hangar bay, it's a race to the finish on foot. You jump in that longsword and you make your way off the Pillar of Autumn, eventually making it off the ring, watching as the Pillar of Autumn finally explodes and destroys the Halo in the background.
Shut them down, we'll need them later.
Cortana then confirms that there were no survivors, just dust and echoes. And this is where the game leaves you, flying back to humanity, wondering what's going to happen next. So, that is why Halo is such an amazing game, and why you should still play it this many years later. Even if you watch this 20 years from now, I'll still have the same opinion. You should still play it 20 years from now. Whether we get a remake or not, this game just does so many things well. It gives you horror, gives you action, gives you a sense of wonder and excitement. It lets you listen to a pretty banger soundtrack throughout, and that is why it's still one of the greatest games ever made. So, maybe let me know in the comments, what are some of your earliest memories with Halo? What do you love most about this game? How soon are you going to grab a friend who's never played Halo before and force them into a legendary run with you? Anyway, if you like this video, please go ahead and like and subscribe, comment below, and maybe watch another one.